you, and you'll be 15 minutes late.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a hard stop at 11, so I'm
Yep,
gonna
yep,
just
let's
go
do it.
ahead and start and,
You do that.
join us when you can. So, good morning, everyone. I'd
Good
like
morning.
to call this meeting to order, and roll call, let's see.
Chair Yakoba. Here. Director Stinks.
Here.
Director Smith.
Here.
Thank you. Currently absent are Vice Chair Miller and Director Giddens.
Great, thank you. We have a consent, public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. The public may provide comments on any item not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. Are there any members? Yes, hello, Mr. James.
Hi, James Sawyer, resident of Sunnyvale. Just real quick, just in case anybody didn't know, recently learned that the County of Santa Clara on this coming Tuesday morning Board of Supervisors meeting is planning to vote on whether or not to declare a climate emergency, which that's just seems to be a movement around the cities around here, so just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. So there was a large
Are
group.
they going to do anything?
Well, that's a good question. So we, a group of 15 leaders met with Supervisor Dave Cortese, if I said that right, in his office yesterday afternoon, and that was my first question: is what will it allow or help you do that needs to be done? He wasn't firm on that, other than he actually said, he was telling all of us in the audience as advocates to say, well, that will make it easier for all of you to hold our feet to the fire. Just like in Sunnyvale, where we declared, we asked council 3 years ago to make climate action, accelerating climate action a priority, and that actually did start helping things. So he thought it would make it easier for advocates to force them to do things that he would be in favor of, but would make it easier. And secondly, he talked about certain staff in the county are hard to move. And yeah, he did. And so he didn't say it directly, but the other implication was that he thought it would make it easier for him to get staff to do things. So that's happening on Tuesday. So there's just to let you know.
Thank you. Bruce, hi.
So Bruce Carney from Mountain View. The thing I wanted to talk about today is the measurement activity that SVCE undertakes to identify the GHG emissions from each of its cities. I think, this will be the second year that SVCE has done that, and I think it's a really important initiative for a variety of reasons. Number one is that you save the cities money by providing common process, timing, etc. But there's a problem with what happened last year. None city shared what SVCE provided with the public. Why they didn't share it with the public, I don't know, but let's just assume it was either because they were embarrassed by the results or felt that the results were incomplete because they didn't include all of the emission sources. What SVCE measures captures about 90% of the emissions. So how would this problem be solved? Well, one way to solve the secrecy problem, if I may refer to it as such, is for SVCE as a public agency to release the same information that it releases to the cities to the public through its own website. So even though that's only 90% of the emission sources, it gives you a pretty good indication of where the various cities are. A second approach, or perhaps a compatible alternative, would be for SVCE to do the complete inventory for all of its member agency cities in the county. And that would provide an even more useful data point than simply the transportation, electricity, natural gas emissions. I'm very concerned about the ability of the agency to achieve its mission of bending the carbon curve if the data points that make up the carbon curve are not disclosed to the public. Because what triggers public response to climate issues is data. Data may be the Brazilian rainforest burning, it may be the temperature of 106 in Florence, or it may be local GHG emissions. But I don't think it's acceptable going forward to have the data that you spend time and public money gathering and disseminating not being shared with the public.
Thank you. Do you have, are you able to respond to that?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One is I'll meet with Mr. Carney after the meeting to talk about some ideas. but at a minimum, we could send it to all the board members and city managers.
Okay.
So we did that last year, linked to all the spreadsheets. And then we are also planning in November to send to all city council members, so 70 or so, community benefits for the last year. So give a summary of that. So again, getting the word out about what each city has accomplished. So maybe those are the two immediate actions that come to mind.
And then any comments on the county's declaration?
Yeah, I'll be, actually, I'll be meeting with Supervisor AZ on September 4th or 5th. So I will also talk to him about what actions we can support the county with.
Great.
One of the things I mentioned was to get them to get their reach codes moving.
Yes, that would be a good item to emphasize. All right, any other public comments? Oh,
Hi, my name's Sam Irvin, along with my colleague Richard Sikorsky. We represent the mobility group, and we're here just to be a resource for you as we talk about the EV section later today.
Great, thank you for being here and welcome. Anyone else? All right, we will move on to the consent calendar. This is approval of minutes from the May 24th executive committee meeting. Are there any comments, changes? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I move approval of the consent calendar. Second.
Any discussion? Any members of the public wishing to speak? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We move on to the regular calendar. Item 2, our CEO update.
Very quickly, I'll keep it to less than a minute. We're working on updating our budget based on the board comments from last board meeting. So we plan to provide that at the September 11th meeting. We are getting into the last few weeks of the legislative session. So just be primed, as we talked to you before, that we will be approaching many of you and giving you updates all, but approaching you for any assistance as bills get resurrected or changed. We don't have PG&E filing its reorganization plan. We expect that to be filed somewhere in the September 9th timeframe. So keep your eyes open for more information on that.
And they're the sole entity to be able to file.
Correct, the judge ruled that they would be the only one who can file a reorganization plan
At this time.
at this time, correct. That's all I have in my update.
Great. Any
So they're not
questions?
taking your line,
Any members of the public wishing to comment? If not, we'll move on to item 3, our customer communications discussion items. Is it Dawn and Pam?
Hi.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So this morning, we just wanted to provide a brief update on where we are going with our communications to our customers and customer engagement activities going into looking at maybe about the next 6 months or so. So just kind of looking at where we've been and where we're going. The last, our first 2 years since we were formed and when we launched, that's primarily what we focused on. CCE is a new concept. We needed to make sure we were providing the how it works was a big emphasis, letting customers know about their choices, giving them the option, or they always have the option to opt out, but making sure that that was an easy and prominent decision. And really making it an easy sell about, cleaner and lower rates. Going forward, now that we have the decarbonization roadmap, we really want to focus on the need we have to inspire and motivate customers to take action to further reduce their emissions. So we're going to continue to focus on the benefits that we're providing to the community through, of course, carbon-free electricity, but also the value of our reinvestment in the community, and that's part of our ongoing, and we're always going to need that base, education and customer retention activities, but there is just going to be a focus on the longer term needs of decarbonization. So just kind of a reminder of where we've been. So, our website to date is still primarily focused on the operational aspects of what we do and the mechanics of how it all works. These were the key messages that we started with. You can see that choice was a big part of this. But now that the communities have chosen, we're moving forward to really refine these things. And these are the sort of the value proposition, the key messages, our key benefits that we've already started to implement in our updated collateral materials and website to date. And also being bolder in our statements as well. We were a little cautious at the beginning, right? And so now we've done a lot of surveys with our customers. We understand that our community, overwhelming majority really care about doing something about climate change. So we want them to know that our primary mission is to fight climate change on behalf of all the communities and for them, and to help them do that. And accelerating the adoption of innovative electric technologies, of course, is in line with a lot of the programmatic work we're doing. And never, of course, leaving behind the commitment to our communities and reinvesting locally through the programs for competitive rates. Building new renewable energy projects is also up at the top there. Yes, so those are our new messages. And as I said, these are making their way into our collateral updates already. On our website, we've already implemented some of these changes into the headers, just little things that we're doing in this interim period. Before we get to the big changes and projects to really get these going, which I'm gonna switch over to Dawn for that.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah,
Now,
sure.
You said something really interesting, which is, to me, which was we were cautious in the beginning. I'm thinking to myself, well, we said we're carbon-free for less, right? And we're bringing this value, so what in the survey data is suggesting? I guess, yes, yeah, you move on from that to programs, right? But I'm just wondering what your polling data indicates. I mean, would it indicate that we could charge more? Or,
So cost specifically, one of the surveys that we did in fall 2017
yeah,
showed that the cost differential of $1 savings or $2 savings or $5 savings didn't move people one way or another. A lot of folks, of course in surveys they say that they are okay with cost being on par for a cleaner product.
yeah.
But it's pretty much, if you're just a little bit less, it doesn't really matter how much less it was. So that was one of the things that we did see.
For example, was there a question like, would you be in favor of charging everybody a little bit more to contribute to programs?
We didn't have a question specifically about funding programs. It was more looking at the discount for the electricity rates. But I can go back and double
It would be an interesting question, right? Would you rather, or put another way, would you rather get an extra few nickels in your pocket, or? I'm wondering if the attitudes are shifting based on what many would argue is a climate emergency for real.
It is actually very funny that you would say that, because I have actually been in touch with several elected officials from several of our cities at this table. And I don't want to say every council has climate deniers, but every council has climate deniers, and those that are on their councils are being more vocal and more aggressive.
Really?
To the point of me arguing with the CPA that we actually have done something here. And anyway, I just think that the attitudes are bifurcating. They're not bending. They're bifurcating, and I think that's an even more complicated environment to be in.
And I was just gonna reinforce the discussion. It's an important question. Basically, I think as elected officials, we can talk about cost savings, not climate change.
Safely talk about.
Safely talk about cost savings. and ongoing cost savings with our programs. And I find myself that that's a very positive message.
Right. No, I'm not trying to have a survey for a leading question, really, I'm not. I'm just interested in the attitude, right?
I feel like the elected officials' attitudes have changed in the last 2 years. From a little bit more neutral to a lot more opinionated. And have to argue with somebody that no actual money has been saved, it's just an accounting shell game. That argument with an elected official who's a mayor of a city near us, this is a weird world we're in right now.
Well, I know of one, but.
Sorry, I'm gonna ask Scott to
Sorry.
continue.
Mhm.
We can have this conversation
Thank you.
about
It's actually
appliances later.
really interesting conversation and a very good segue. So
Sorry.
when Pam talked about being cautious,
There's no,
I think initially we were very focused on having a balanced message, an environmental and an economic message and so forth. What our survey data tells us is that there is a lot of interest in doing something about climate change out there. There are a lot of people that don't know what to do.
Right.
And you know, so I'm being told to recycle, I'm being told to bring a mug to work and not use one of those, you know, or whatever it might be. And people don't really know
Only use a
how.
plastic straw for.
Yeah, whatever you do, don't use a plastic straw. And so people are trying to do the right thing, but they need help with calibration in a sense. You know, what are the most important things to do as it relates to, you know, your impact on the climate, and what can I do that's practical? I mean, can I take some easy steps like join SVCE? Okay, I've checked that box. Now what do I do? So we really want to pivot. That's a word I think we've all used, you know, from this. Okay, we're here to, in the background, provide clean energy to really now engaging with the community in this much broader and more ambitious effort that's going to take many years to decarbonize and electrify. And that's going to take a lot of education and awareness building. It's going to take making new products and services available to customers and educating on them, and then having the resources in place out in the community to actually get those things accomplished. So we've, as you all know, we've had this customer resource center on the horizon for a while. We did an RFI over the last several months where we went out and got information from a number of different vendors that have tools that support awareness and education and marketplaces and so forth. Got a lot of very interesting responses. There's some really cool new tools coming together. We've also engaged with SMUD, our program delivery partner, who has probably gone further on this than any utility. In fact, they just won an award, largely based on what they've done with their electronic marketplace. So we've been learning a lot. We're putting an RFP together over the next few months here. I'm wandering ahead of my slides.
yeah, it's like following, you're on a page. Actually, I think you're on 13.
Yeah, okay, I'm almost finished.
I'm like, where are we?
So what I'd like to do is just spend a few minutes here really on how the RFP is coming together, what elements we're looking for, and I think we can continue to engage this forum and maybe the board more broadly on this as we go. As you'll see on the last slide, we're looking to have this released around Earth Week, or Earth Month, as Pam calls it, next year. So we're really looking to build this out. Yeah, April next year. So in terms of the areas that we want to address with the resource center, imagine a two-dimensional matrix, if you will, with one dimension really being the topic, and we've identified energy and emissions, mobility in the built environment. In our work with the CPAG last year, we heard a lot about, hey, help us understand our energy use, help us understand the impact of direction, electrification, and decarbonization. And then in terms of outcomes, the other dimension, if you will, of the matrix, with some customers, we really have to start at the very top with awareness and education. And then those customers can move downstream into consideration and decision-making, whether it's in mobility or the built environment, and then ultimately, how do we support customers in their quest to implement? How do we help them find a plumber to put in a new heat pump water heater? It's a very real issue,
Yeah.
as many of you know. So these outcomes really span the life cycle in a sense of awareness all the way through getting solutions in place. So this is what it looks like gridded out. When we did our RFI, we asked vendors to, in a sense, tell us where they were in this in this landscape, and we had solution providers all over the place, interesting products out there for awareness and education and consideration and decision making in the EV space, for instance. We've seen some really good stores, online stores for buying energy efficient products and services. So Smud's had some terrific experience with that. It's been down in this area. We've been looking at services that serve as concierges. If you're looking to electrify or looking to install solar plus storage, there are services that will help you choose a contractor and, in a sense, design your system and then find the best deal that's out there. And we're getting that question all the time when we table. I bet it's the number. I'm thinking of doing solar. Who should I talk to?
It's on next door constantly.
Yeah, and so how do we scratch that itch? How do we have an answer to that question? How do we engage with our community on these critical questions? So our RFP is kind of a complicated slide, but I think the takeaways are we are going to be looking to engage with a quote unquote marketing firm or a firm that can help us restructure elements of our website to put a top level wrapper around, okay, I'm a customer, I'm interested in learning more or finding a contract or whatever else, helping to bring people in and get them channeled into the right solutions. And then on the next tier, it'll be 1 to N service providers. I'm guessing it'll probably wind up being 3 or 4 that provide an EV evaluation and an education tool, perhaps a store, a solar selection service, helping to fill in that map, that matrix that we showed on the previous slide. I'm sorry.
The teaming with the other CCAs on this.
Oh, yeah, good point. We are keenly interested in not being out on this pier alone, or creating something that is unique to the boundaries of our CCA, but rather to put the tools in place that would be easily extendable and could be used by other CCAs. So we're working with SVCE and with Sonoma Clean Power. I'd say of all the CCAs, Sonoma Clean Power has probably been the most progressive in starting to think about some of this. Doing some terrific work up there. So we're thinking if we kind of gang up and form this RFP and make some of these decisions together, that we'll have something that's more likely to be extendable. Okay, so we could build the greatest website in the world, but as all of you know, it doesn't count for anything unless you actually get people there. So we had some good success doing outreach by email. We have 150,000 email addresses, 150,000, maybe 125,000 good ones. Now these came to us through PG&E by and large. So if you get your bill by email, etc. And we've run surveys where you get $100 off your electricity bill, or you're entered which
Oh,
reinforces the fact that we can actually do that, right? That we are on your electricity bill. And we've had terrific click-through rates and open rates and response rates. So we're confident that we can engage customers and get them to this resource center as we
How many
start to
email
build
passes?
this. Sorry?
It's about
120.
110 to 125,000 that are valid and good, yeah. And we've engaged maybe about 70,000 so far.
That's great.
And so the, part of what we'll be, that the marketing firm, and to some extent, Smud's had some good experience with this, and there are lots of people that are looking to help on this. But this is a real linchpin, is that, you know, we can build it, but it's only gonna be as good as we can get traffic to it. And then you start getting into all the usual, you know, who comes to our site, who lands on what pages and stays there, and, you know, and all that sort of thing, which, you know, a year from now, hopefully we'll be able to talk about those sorts of metrics and what's working and what isn't, and the like. From an equity and access standpoint, again, we think it's really important that this is something that works for our entire community. We did some work profiling customers last year. We have plus or minus 10% that we call the energy wonks. I mean, these are people that are into this. Well represented at this table. And then there's another group, it was 20 or 25% that are sustainably minded, well educated, the types of folks that are really looking, that want to do the right thing and just need help understanding what that is, or, you know, resources that they can learn from to make those determinations. But we have people at the far end of the spectrum, the other end of the spectrum, you know, 5% or so that are never going to like this, and that you know, are banging away on us and next door and that sort of thing. And we can't. That's why I was so interested in this conversation early on, is that we know there's a bifurcation out there. And I think it's gonna be important that the board helps us think about that, because you're living this every day. Are we going to be guided by trying to be, you know, safe, or are we gonna be guided by trying to really engage the folks in the community that want to engage with this?
I think there's another way to cut that, which is some people are motivated by one message and some are motivated by another. My right-wing climate denier friend just bought a used Tesla because it suddenly dawned on him after 5 years of pounding that he doesn't pay for gas, he doesn't pay for smog checks, and he doesn't get oil changes. He's telling me how much he's saving now that he's got this car. Forget the climate. Some people are motivated by that.
Yeah.
Some people are motivated by climate. We know that the 35 of us are. But I think that when you talk about anything, there's a benefit. And I think our benefits for some of them are going to be very clear cost, return on investment. Go change your thermostat, you're going to save a lot of money. Or go do this, you'll save a lot of money. Others are going to be a little bit more touchy-feely green. Do this, it's very good for the environment. It might not save you any money, but at least you'll be helping the environment at neutral.
Well, I think segueing back to the earlier question from Rod, that if we keep, and I'm gonna say this, the political environment and support, that we are less than PG&E. I think that that's a very positive, clear-cut justification for why our cities wanna participate in Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Then, I think all of these programs, and the email addresses, I think, just proved it. There are people who want this. We don't, I know we want to advertise it, get buy-in and users and all that, but that's not going to be seen as the core mission from an organizational point of view, and it will allow those who really want to know, have a resource to go to. And I think that's a very simple, positive way for the board to move, if that makes sense to you.
I mean, I would say, just, you know, starting out, let's try to capture the largest pot, piece of the pot. And then, you know, the naysayers are always, there's gonna always be naysayers, right? And I wouldn't spend too much time on them. My interest is really, you know, to getting to the masses, so that's where our focus should be. Yeah.
You said 120,000, right?
It's, yeah, roughly.
So what fraction, assuming we have one email per household, what fraction of the households is that?
Oh, yeah.
About half.
Oh,
Okay.
But you say you've only engaged with 70, so
Well, in our various
So far.
surveys, yeah.
Yeah,
and-
so far.
somewhere between a third and a quarter we know are connected.
Well, and I think this is just to the point of bringing in a really strong marketing firm to support us, because they'll be able to spend the time in testing messages to, you know, we spent the last year developing this customer segmentation to have a good understanding of the 5 or 6 different, you know, sort of attitudes among our residential customers. So, yeah, this is gonna be a great way to experiment with targeting certain messages that resonate with different people, and for whether it's environmental or cost savings or health is a big component too, so.
Are we doing the same thing with our corporate base, our business customers? Surveying?
Not for these programs, these.
in the programs or.
Well, it's about attitudes and, it'd be a different survey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the, well,
They're probably more
we've had
about
the direct engagement through Walks for Lunch and that sort of thing. The surveying in the corporate sector, not to make excuses, but it's trickier because the email can be, you know, an accounting department, third-party accounting department in Ohio, or, you know, so we don't have quite as direct an email link, unfortunately. So,
Nancy had a comment or question.
Yeah, I wanted to say that this reminds me of classic change management. So maybe simplified, but definitely the same steps as change management. And I just, I think that's great, to take the lead on this and also collaborate with other CCAs. My question is, have you given any thought to how this will, in terms of it being a marketing function, how will it strengthen our brand? And secondly, where does this fall in our strategic initiative or strategic plan?
Well, we definitely have goals around customer engagement, so this falls well within that, as well as the decarbonization goals. This was one of the programs approved in the decarbonization roadmap. And I think in terms of brand awareness, this is our biggest opportunity to date, because it's our first mass marketing opportunity that is something that would be applicable to every residential customer, where before, and mostly to date, it's been like our regulatory requirements to do these mass mailings and send, you know, these notices twice a year. And we're in a very tricky market when it comes to our media market as well, just with our geography. So there's been some limitations in terms of our advertising abilities, as well as the message of, you know, I always throw advertisers completely upside down, because I'm like, well, we just want customers to know who we are, but we don't actually necessarily want them to take an action, right? Unless it's like a green prime, which we did do a green prime campaign last summer, and it gave us some results, so we know that it's working and people are interested. But this is something where I just think we can finally take advantage of us kind of being like, hey, this is out there for everybody. So I think it's really gonna be a big push that is gonna be kind of the first of its kind, where some of the other programs are a bit more like targeted towards, you know, B2B or to, you know, like property owners or things like that. So yeah, this is, you know, what I'm excited about is we can advertise to everybody, and renters, homeowners, you name it.
It's in our strategic plan,
Yes.
so it has been teed up as one of our priorities. And in terms of a work plan, this is the first 6 months of 2020. We plan to roll this out, so this is a goal that we have.
Wonderful.
And is it in, yeah,
That's
Do you
all.
want, oh,
yeah, sorry, so which one, is it in the customer engagement one? Okay. Alright.
When do we get to find out kind of what the theme is? You're not gonna send a card to somebody saying, hey, we got a great new matrix for you.
Oh, yeah.
There's gonna,
You don't like that?
It's gotta be some like,
Silicon
Back to the
Valley.
drawing board,
yeah, something like
Yeah.
But there's gotta be some big theme, like, you know, last year we saved the average customer $250, let us help you save more. I mean, I don't know, what's our big message, you think? Or do we know that? Am I just too soon?
I think that's to come when
Okay.
once we do the RFP and find a marketing partner to help us with this. We've actually been engaged with the Building Decarbonization Coalition. We are a funding partner for a massive research project and marketing firm that they've brought on to help brand decarbonization without calling it decarbonization, for the mass, public awareness and education. And so we've learned a ton through that, and what's great is we have access to that research, and even the IOUs are big partners in that too, and they of course have vast resources for research. So a lot of that has been really insightful, and it's just a matter of having a great creative agency that can put it together and, outside of living and breathing decarbonization and electrification every day, and find what really is gonna attract customers and in a simple, accessible way.
Some of the good advice we've been receiving as we've been working on this is pivoting from about us to about you. I mean, really making this by and for the customer, and how can we be a resource to them, as opposed to how can we tell you some more about ourselves and how great we are.
Even the energy wonks, the first thing they look at, anything, the PV, the battery, whatever, is how much money am I gonna save?
Yeah.
So we're never gonna leave the money, we're saving you money.
Yeah, what's in it for you? What's the full value proposition? Points are really, really well taken, and because people are gonna respond to different care abouts.
Right, I'm sure John learned a lot from the workshops that he did on EV bills.
I'm gonna open this up to public comment because I see some hands, so.
Hi, Bruce Carney again. I had the privilege in 2007 of being a community purchase program manager for Solar City. This was at a time when solar was transitioning from the typical model, which was 2 hippies, 1 van, past the stage of 4 hippies, 2 vans, to venture capital funded growth ramp dreaming companies, and the 2 at the time were Sunrun and Solar City. Without big venture capital transforming the nature of what a solar installer was, we would never have gotten to where we are with residential rooftop solar. And the same transition happened in the electric vehicle market when it was kit builders and crazy people who wanted to somehow go 40 miles without plugging into an outlet, to Tesla. Tesla's first products were very low volume, very unappealing to the masses, very overpriced. But we're now in the transition where we're seeing that big companies are investing billions and billions of dollars in that technology. Now, I see nothing on the horizon to tell me that heat pump water heaters are ready to go through that transformation. And so what that means for those who are trying to run the crossing the chasm game through the early adopters is if you really want to envision the other side of the chasm, you want to envision something like rooftop solar or EV penetration, there have to be some installers who have access to Sand Hill Road capital levels, and the desire to not be the family-run plumbing business, the small electrical business. They really have to have the desire to be different in a big way. And failing that, you will find yourself listing dozens and dozens of people who could do 1 or 2 of these a week, and people will be super confused. The next door conversations about solar will be 10 times more, well, I hope they'll be 10 times more, about heat pump water heaters. So give some thought to how a public agency can help pick winners, or work with someone who can pick winners, so that you actually can do the scaling that you hope to do.
Thank you.
James Talia, Sunnyvale. So I'm enthusiastic about this transition. I'm glad to see it happening, and I wanted to note that the timing is really good for what is happening in my own town of Sunnyvale. Last Tuesday, the city council, thank you Nancy, and the rest of the non-climate deniers on our council, unanimously approved our climate action playbook or plan 2.0. So it builds a nice framework for working into the future. A whole bunch of strategy, a whole lot of things to work on. It's heavily dependent on the engagement and the interaction and partnership with this agency. It's just critical. And so the movement, the transition to these kinds of messages and helping to bring people and engaging customers is perfect timing for what needs to happen in what in Sunnyvale's plan is called the next moves. So the next 3 years, there are certain next moves that are going to happen to advance some of these strategies starting in year 1, in the year 2, year 3. So there's some things that are need to start being planned and communities engaged, customers engaged, and implementation happening. And so it's really a good time to try to figure out how can our city staff work with this staff on how does what we need plug into that, where does SVCE play in our own plan, and other plans like what's happening in Mountain View, for example. So I think this is another good example of where what's happening here is going to tie in very well with what's happening in the member cities. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Okay,
Oh.
yep, well,
Sorry,
yeah,
we didn't
I
quite
got to my
finish
punch early, but this is the timeline, so yeah, that's really it for the presentation.
Great. Any other comments? We kind of had a discussion, so.
Got it.
Great, all right. Yes.
So we'll
huge.
bring this back to the exec committee, at least a couple more times.
Mhm.
And then also take it to the board, so we'd like to get your advice on that,
Board in October, right?
I would,
Remember.
so we're going to, after this RFP process, in the probably November, December timeframe, I think we're gonna have a pretty clear idea about what some of the solution elements are, not so much the perfect messaging yet or that, but really to be able to talk about what tools we're proposing to adopt. We're also going to be looking to have contracts approved, so that could be good timing.
We'll see your matrix filled in a little bit. Which
Yeah,
will be
yeah,
nice.
exactly, with some solutions.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Kudos to you.
Yeah.
It's thrilling to know we have direct access to half our base.
Yeah. All right, so we move on to 4 is, oh, sorry, are you next? Workforce Development Initiative update, is that you?
Yep. This is actually a pretty perfect transition. Whoever put this agenda order together. So, let's see here. All right. So, yes, this is a good transition because as we were just talking about trying to find more holistic ways to get some of these technologies accessible to our customers, this is yet another angle and a very important one. So we're going to give today an update on the Workforce Development Initiative that the full board approved back in April. So first of all, we'll do a quick review of what the board actually approved. And that is $200,000 over fiscal years 19 and 20, roughly broken down into 2 phases. We knew that at the beginning there needed to be a lot of information gathering and research that would go into this because this is an area that's entirely new for us from a program design perspective. So phase 1 is dedicated to outreach and research, and then phase 2 is more on designing the specific details of the program and arranging logistics to get that launched. So we're coming to you at roughly the boundary between phases 1 and 2, where we've done quite a lot of background research and we're starting to focus on how we can narrow that into a program design. So a little bit of a quick review of what we're trying to accomplish with this initiative. Workforce development is a piece, when we talk about how to deploy low carbon technology, a lot of focus is rightly put on consumer adoption decisions. And workforce development is a piece that feeds directly into that. but had not been an explicit focus in our program work thus far. So ideally, the relationship we're trying to foster here is that by contributing to workforce development, we can make these low carbon technologies more accessible to our customers, and at the same time, we can be providing opportunities for members of our communities to benefit from this rollover in technology that's happening as a result of decarbonization. So we're trying to design a program that is very much in sync with what's going on already in the workforce development community. We want to be creating something that people actually need and that is complementary to existing initiatives as opposed to duplicative. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel, and we want to make sure that our initiative is as good as possible, that we're reaching the people that we need to reach. So after that April board meeting, when we had funding approved, we kind of started from ground zero. And when we think about how to design a program like this, really, we need answers to two different sets of questions. On one hand, we know that workforce development plays into technology adoption, but we want the program that we're designing to be addressing the very specific mechanisms by which those two forces interact. So the first thing is, do I have a pointer here? Oh yeah, there we go. Oh, it doesn't work on screen.
Doesn't work this way.
Fair enough. So on the left side there, we wanted to define the problem more concretely, or the challenge, I should say. What are we actually trying to change on the ground through this program? And then along with that is, where are the gaps and opportunities in existing workforce development opportunities for people? So that's the challenge side. Then on the other side there, we need specific answers about what our program should look like. So who are the stakeholders already in existence that we should be partnering with? What technologies should we be focusing on? And that's, right now we have a broad swath available, right? We're looking at decarbonization across a number of sectors, so we should be thinking about where that needs to happen, what types of program structures are effective, and given that there are going to be a number of different structures that we can choose between, what principles should be guiding us? So what we were thinking about the problem statement, one of the lenses that we used is, what perspective can SVCE lend to this that doesn't already exist out there? And so when we think about all the different stakeholders in this ecosystem, they all have different perspectives. You know, you've got the equipment manufacturers that are interested in pushing technology out. You've got the local unions and the professionals who need to make a living, and they're operating in the local economic conditions. The place where we thought there was space for SVCE to really bring something unique is as a customer advocate. When we think about what drives consumer technology adoption decisions, a big piece of that is the customer experience. Once they've developed an interest in a technology, what happens next? And we touched on this a little bit in Pam and Don's presentation just a moment ago, that the response that they get and resources that are available to them once they've established interest in a technology can really make all the difference between whether they go ahead with that and end up adopting, or just kind of move on to something that's less difficult. So the mechanism, so the perspective that we have really tried to take through this whole process is, how can we be a customer advocate and think about things through the lens of what the customer is experiencing as they're trying to go through this technology adoption process. And one of the sort of early dynamics that we've observed with early adopters of these technologies, as again Don and Pam alluded to, is that oftentimes low carbon technologies require different skills to install and maintain than traditional counterparts. And so in the early part of the adoption curve, you see consumers sort of having to function as system integrators. The burden is sort of on them to figure out where can they find the technology, what skills are needed to service it, and then they go out and find people with those skills.
Or you call Howard.
Exactly. And if everybody was like Howard, then maybe we wouldn't need this program.
Well, I mean, seriously, right? Some of us would call our local energy one.
Truly.
Somebody we happen to know.
I really want to be designated as not the 10%, but the 1%.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Okay.
You got
Create
it.
a new persona.
If everybody had these skills, then, right,
Every time.
But as we move sort of down the adoption curve, we would hope that we can create an environment where people who don't have those skills can have a pretty easy experience
Of course.
going through this technology transition. So that's the lens that we use to try and define this. And then on the other side, we've spent a lot of time mapping the landscape that we're moving into in workforce development. And this is something that is brand new for SVCE. It's relatively new for CCAs in general. So that's something that we wanted to make sure that we did pretty comprehensively before we start moving into specific programs on budget. So over the last few months, we've had a pretty extensive and also ongoing network of meetings and stakeholder interviews with representatives of our local unions, institutions in the communities that are related to workforce development resources, including NOVA just across the street there, educational institutions, local colleges, that kind of thing, that are often partnering with unions and professional organizations. And we're still working on, we have some contacts, but trying to expand our communications with contractors.
I have to ask, just, this sounds really weird. Most of the battlefront here is gonna be residential, it's gonna be customers. They are not, in my observation, I can be totally wrong, but look at these guys. The unions have nothing to do with this space at all. We put a lot of energy in the unions because they are allowed. These are the individual contractors. It's that side of the workforce. And their connection to union, unless they're doing commercial jobs or things like that, is zero. So
But we're trying to work on workforce training to get the members of unions to move into this area. So that's why we're focused on unions.
So explain to me again, so supposing we did that perfectly, my thought is that that's a few thousand of the hundreds of thousands of clients that we have.
It's a lot
No.
more.
Yeah,
It's
can I say it
that's the
back?
bulk.
Because I think you were just
No,
saying.
there's no union person who installs a heater at somebody's house, right? That's what I'm kind
I
of
think you
thinking.
We're
have-
trying to shift.
So you have a good point, and that's part of what we've discovered as we've gone out and talked to folks. I think there may be a sweet spot when it comes to like apartments, because that's where you have,
Those would be union jobs, those sorts of.
Exactly.
Those
And
sorts of
so-
projects.
and that's where labor unions also have their apprentice training programs that feed into that kind of work. And so those are still residential.
My brain, you're right, my brain
Yes, like
somehow
single-family
wrapped
homes.
around residential retrofit.
Yeah.
Single-family
Yeah.
retrofit,
And
which
that's-
is 250,000 accounts.
Right, so this is exactly what we're finding out. What's the sweet spot for us? And
Minus the hardest spot.
that is exactly it.
I-
It is the hardest spot, so where should we spend our effort in the short term and long term? And that's kind of what we're discovering, it may be,
I fully yield to the greater wisdom in the room, thank you for explaining that.
Well, that's a good transition, actually, because I want to just talk a little bit more about the relationships among the stakeholders here that go into this customer experience when someone wants to adopt a low carbon technology. So if we look, first of all, at sort of, so what I've got here, if you look at the bottom, think as we move left to right, increasingly long time horizons. So in the shortest time frame, when a customer makes a call to get installation of, for example, a heat pump water heater, who plays into that? So you've got most directly the contractors and the professionals that they send out to the job site. And you've got the technology manufacturers that are working with contractors to sort of make the technologies actually available. You've got the local unions that, as you pointed out, in some sectors, are representing professionals and also negotiating with contractors. So if we want to make changes, so that's one time frame we can think about, sort of how do we change the direct chain of steps that happens when a customer makes a call to a contractor. But then if we step back a little bit, we can think about how professional education is happening and where that's happening. So the local unions are one major hub for that. You've got technology manufacturers sometimes pair with unions at their own training facilities to provide training on specific technologies. You have a lot of unions pairing with local colleges and educational institutions to work to design and implement their chain of training, which, as many of you seem familiar with, you've got pre-apprentice, which can start in high school, up through apprentice, journeyman, and then continuing education. So there's a strong link between the unions and a lot of our local educational institutions. You've got community workforce development centers, which occupy kind of a parallel niche in the sense that they provide workforce development resources in sectors where unions are not as prevalent. And all of this is feeding into the skill set that individual professionals acquire, they can then deploy when they go out to a job site. So if we're thinking about where we might want to intervene, this is a step where we could be looking at changing the skills that workers are acquiring, and that would be a longer term investment that then can be deployed across many different operations over time, many different job sites over time. And then if we back up a little further, this is now getting into really longer term investments, and I think this might be something that we would want to pair with a more immediate pilot, but just when we're thinking about how the whole picture fits together. The curriculum for professional education is not created from scratch by every local union. That is set in part with guidance from national union leadership, and then it's also dictated in part by state law, because you've got the state government sets the requirements for the certifications that union members need in order to be able to do their work. So in the sort of longest term lens, if we were to create something here that we feel is really producing valuable skills that can help with deploying low carbon technologies, potentially that's something that you could spread up and out to other locations, or you could even change state certification requirements to encourage more cross-training related to these technologies. So those are sort of the major relationships that feed into what ultimately happens when a customer is looking for someone who can meet these needs. And we can think about where we want to intervene on all those levels. So how do we start to move this toward a program design? And there are sort of several major approaches we can take.
Oh, I'm sorry, can we take a question?
Oh yeah,
Yes, can you back up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, I'm gonna be my usual broken record. This is all useful, good, I understand why we're here, I understand the lead up to it and all of that. I have some recommendations on some tweaks on some languages and challenges. But I also think we've defined the customer as being I'm gonna say the contact point, the decision maker, right? You've said they're the person that's trying to figure out all of this, okay? I keep saying that architects and engineers are decision makers, particularly if you're talking about union jobs. And we're really missing this. I just came back from a conference of the architects. I told you that in June, the AIA, as a international organization, made a decision to decarbonization is the priority, and they are regrouping around that. In Denver, we just did a proposal to write a climate action plan for the AIA, okay? And the local California AIA and the AIA National are all supporting the zero code. Now, I don't happen to agree with that, but that's where it's going. So there's a lot of, I would just caution us to understand, if we follow the rationale that got us here, we're finding the sweet spot, which is the unions and the training, I get that. But the customer is not going to be making the decisions. It's going to be the developers, architects, and engineers. And I have another side tweak about legislation, but we can go there later.
All right, thank you, that's extremely helpful. So then, moving on to sort of how we might translate these relationships into specific program structures. There are kind of three major categories that we're thinking about. some of which will also dovetail with these other initiatives like the Customer Resource Center that we're working on elsewhere. So first of all, we can think about changing who's carrying out the work, who is going to the job site, what skills are they bringing. And so this could be about changing the norms such that you're bringing together groups of professionals that haven't traditionally needed by default to work together on certain types of jobs like water heater. So this is a lens that would be about really working at the contractor level to forge different relationships that can change the norms about who's going to a job site. Then, on the second one, you can try and change the skills that are required by individual professionals. So maybe it's helpful to have a little bit more cross-training in certain areas than we've had traditionally. Maybe we can bring in skills related to specific technologies. This would be focusing on building skills for individual workers.
Does this include changing the contractor licensing structure?
I
Like
think
if you can be a plumber, and you can be an electrician, but they have no such thing as an electrician-plumber license, for example.
I would put that in the first category in the sense that, well, actually, no, it would go more in the second. Yes, that would be a very long-range, long-term project in that category, I think.
One of the things we're discovering as we are meeting with various stakeholders is which minefields have a lot of mines in them, which have fewer, and figuring out which minefield we want to traverse first and later. So,
And because one of the side comments we've talked about is changing from all the people that are trained to do gas piping and basically putting them out of business, out of jobs.
Right.
And retraining it,
yes.
okay, and that hasn't come up yet.
It's
Come up in some of our conversations, and that's why it's, we really want to act, and so we're focusing on the first 6 months of 2020. We want to do something where we can actually put some money to use in something that would move the needle but not blow things up so much where.
I'm not sorry, I'm not seeing it, so keep going.
Yeah.
And then the last one here is about basically finding the operations and professionals who are already familiar with these technologies, those that are kind of out ahead of the curve, and making sure that we're helping them connect with customers who are interested in that. So that could look like something where we're creating a set of standards for a pre-qualification database, sort of connecting contractors with these skills to customers who are interested. So in terms of next steps, we've got a lot coming up this fall. We're continuing to reach out to additional stakeholders for sort of more basic perspective discovery. But we're starting to pivot more to how we want to translate that to specific program design. So that's going to be a major focus for the fall. We're going to be looking at also examples we can bring in, research from other areas where this has been looked at, a little bit of a literature review, and also focusing on making sure that we fully understand from a customer perspective, or as you pointed out, maybe we need to broaden our perspective on what we're thinking about as the customer. So making sure that we understand where the bottlenecks are that are affecting adoption decisions.
Who we think we can move the needle with.
Yeah.
So that's where we stand. As we should point out in terms of timeline, we're continuing to refine this this fall, and we're hoping for early 2020 launch of the most immediate pilot. I think there's enough here that potentially you could run projects that are designed to work on sort of multiple different time horizons, but at the beginning we want to get something that we can deploy relatively quickly, and then maybe think about longer term investments.
With a minimum number of mines and other obstacles.
Yes.
Yes, Liz.
I'm having a lot of trouble with this. We can probably discuss in more detail offline. Yeah, I'm having a lot of trouble. Yeah.
I'm perceiving your trouble as the chicken and the egg trouble. Like, is it the designer that needs to go first, or is it the trade professional, or is it the customer? Is that what I'm perceiving?
That's certainly it. We've bitten, this description is incredibly comprehensive, except for a few things I've mentioned, but it's really, really good. I just think, is it really in our bailiwick? I know we talked about workforce, and all of that. I was thinking much simpler. I really was thinking a much more straightforward, simpler approach, which would be, like Gavilan College this week just announced a workforce training program. West Valley, and I'll give you an example, West Valley, I believe, accepted $1 million donation from the Marijuana Association of California to train people on how to grow and inspect marijuana plants. So,
There you go.
to me, that's very simple and very direct. So,
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of work, being at the community college, there's a bunch of workforce programs, and there's all these state goals
Yeah.
and requirements and stuff. But the general thought is, if there is a job for which somebody,
Yeah.
if they were trained today, they could fill that job,
right,
the community colleges have sources of money to train somebody to do that
Yeah.
exact job. The problem is to say, oh, we want to train people to install electric water heaters or whatever, how to match that up. How do you prove that there's a need? How do you prove it's growing? I mean, all these things.
so,
To address issue, the recommendations that you will see, not today's meeting,
okay,
will be very straightforward. It says, this is what we're gonna do. And we're still in the process of, going out to a variety of stakeholders, and we're discovering things, including, things, manufacturers offer a bunch of training. They have an incentive. So the thing is, we thought if we have the bigger picture here, before we provide you a very specific recommendation, it'll help us in the long run, because if we just do the specific recommendation now,
Yeah.
I may have 6 board members coming up with other simple recommendations,
Come up
and
with
we
6
need
more.
I mean, point taken,
Yeah.
point taken. I mean, when I go to the AA conference, they have training classes there. And I did ask 3 different manufacturers of mechanical equipment if they did hot water heaters, and not one of them did. I asked if they knew about potentials for electrifying an electric building code. None of them did. So, to me, that's as big an obstacle as workforce training, is the manufacturing kind of thing. So, I mean, we could talk more.
and we'll set up a
I'm really-
meeting with
I
you
would be glad to
specifically.
follow.
Yeah.
But I would echo Gricia's comments. We're hoping to get to a simple place, but trying to start with comprehensive
If you're gonna
understanding.
explain this to the board, we're gonna have to work on it.
We won't have this.
Okay, all
Not
right,
yet.
okay.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm not having as much trouble with this, but I do think getting to the influencers, the architects, the specifiers, and figuring out how we are, I think we also need to engage them in parallel. And listening to Liz as a subject matter expert in this, I think would be very important. It's just, yeah, we need to be banging on all cylinders to get the message out if reach codes are widely adopted. I have yet to see the opposition show up, but, the BIA and others could come out and press, and I don't know, right? We haven't seen yet, but,
Sometimes you have to act so that they can see they'll be out for round 2.
I know, but
Get round 1 done.
getting into the professionals that are specifying, I think is vital, as well as the workforce. So that's it.
When you said influencers, who are you referring to with that?
Well, I mean,
Fine.
the CSI, Construction Specification Institute, and also USGBC.
Whatever she says, I mean, no, really, I mean, if you're working in the field, you know.
When you go out and
But I
get a
have no
design
clue.
for something, your pool, your house, whatever, the guy does it, they say, here's what you're getting. And they
Yeah.
hate it when you say, I want an electric pool heater.
They like to peddle what they know how to peddle.
Nancy, and then I'll go to the public.
Yeah, and I want to just get a time check, and then you'll leave your.
I have to leave at 11, so could we
Okay.
move the number 6 up next and then.
Oh, okay, yes,
Okay.
this one is-
Yeah, so my comment first to my fellow executive committee members are, if you have these recommendations, what Hillary would like, I think, is names of contacts that she can approach.
Yeah.
At, you haven't, okay. And then, yeah, secondly, there's a group, so I have one along that line, that's sort of in the workforce development thing, I think maybe Garish knows about them because they were Riverside, is Grid Alternatives. You talked to them, okay. So they would fall under the workforce development or, yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's it, thanks.
Yes, James and Bruce.
James Slade at Sunnyvale. There's a lot of detail I could go into, so I think I want to meet with you to offer. When I worked at PG&E in the early part of my time there, I used to run HVAC energy efficiency programs. And one of the things that we did 10 years ago was to establish the Western HVAC Performance Alliance, essentially a giant stakeholder group of all people in that area. So you're talking about architects. I know all the details of in the HVAC industry. One of the areas that it continues to be a focus of the Western HVAC Performance Alliance, the stakeholder group for collaboration, is workforce education and training. So I can make introductions, I can walk through all the different entities. There, what's missing in here are the HVAC contractor associations like ACA and IHACI, and I can tell you what they all mean. But I just wanted to mention that I can offer that. I don't know the plumbing industry, I don't know others, but I know the HVAC stakeholder groups and who's involved in workforce education and training. So in the space conditioning conversion, I can revert to my background in EE. It also gets into quality. So major focus is making sure you're working with quality contractors and not just anybody. So thanks.
Great, thank you. Bruce.
Hillary, would you mind to go back to slide 7?
7, let's see.
Just click and I'll say yes.
There you go. Oh, wait, I guess it was slide 8. I didn't realize there were many 8s. Okay. Many versions of 8. So I think it would be helpful to develop several specific use cases and look at the chain for each use case. So let me talk about a Mountain View resident in a 70-year-old home who wants a heat pump water heater. Who does he get to deal with? Well, he gets to deal with 2 contractors, the wet contractor and the electrical contractor. He gets to deal with the city permitting process. And if his electrical panel is undersized and needs to be expanded, he needs to deal with PG&E to get a new line drop, new capabilities. That's the worldview that I have, is my 2 contractors, PG&E, the city. There was no professional, no union, and yes, technology manufacturers are important. And one of the things that the complexity of that use case causes is that most people who try to install or say, I want to install a heat pump water heater, are told by one of their contractors, no you don't. And the reason why they say that is because it is so complicated to actually do it that they find they go out, they bid a job, and the customer ultimately says, nah, you're right, I don't want to do that. So that just wasted time and money.
Too much time.
And so making it easy enough for the customer experience to actually result in a sale is critical. And I don't know the answer for how to do that. All I know is that this end of it, for me, in my attempted process, was just much more complicated than allowed me to move easily forward. And gosh, if somebody with my background gets daunted by this, you can only imagine that someone less committed to environmental action, how they're going to handle it. I do think actually that licensing requirement changes so that only one contractor needs to be involved is really critical. How to get Sacramento to make those changes, I don't know. Tom Cabot has thought a lot about that. And this doesn't address the apartment building, it doesn't address new construction, those are other important use cases. But I just felt so much pain trying to do this that I wanted to share that.
And if you don't have the tenacity, you can call 5 contractors, and they all say no. And that's even trying to install a gas water heater that's not a tankless. Imagine if I tried to get a heat pump.
And I do think the schedule, the diagram is somehow missing permitting.
And I wanted to add to that,
There's a
That's the
city.
I think-
yeah, that's true.
that's a good point, that should be on there. I think we're not expecting with this program to solve all of the difficulties that a customer would encounter when they're trying to do this, but hopefully
Well, we
we can
should.
break off a piece, and
No, but
I think there are,
if we can't do what he says, I think we're not gonna make it work.
No, but that was my point up front. If the low-hanging fruit, the most efficient space is gonna be multifamily unionized jobs for large construction, new construction, we may not actually solve your or my problem. I understand that. We need to do what's most effective where we can move the needle right away.
Sure.
Having 2 more contractors in the Bay Area that'll install hot water.
As Bruce says, right, there are different use cases, and if we
Yeah.
understand the
Yeah.
customer is at the center of the experience.
Pick what we're
we
doing
really ought to be
and
thinking
get
about it.
focused, because these are very divergent needs.
well, and I think also some of SVC's other initiatives, like the Consumer Resource Database, can help with some of this too. This is not the only place where we're engaging, but sorry, I didn't mean to.
I'm gonna say again.
I think, just to, I mean, I don't wanna presume that I'm wrapping it up, but just to point out that
Please.
that if we look at what we can do that can bend the carbon curve the most,
The fastest.
I think that's a consideration.
Sure. You gotta start someplace and you never finish till you get started. So
And,
let's
you know, I
go.
think we are, in a way, I think so Liz's concerns, and I think it's great to put in the designers. But I do think this is valuable, because we are mapping out the landmines and the interdependencies that, and building knowledge and expertise, and moving things forward. So, it'll make it easier for, to hand a package to the designers and the architects.
And
I think it's the other way around, but that's
Well,
all right.
No, in terms of the political landscape, so, I mean,
Yes.
are the architects and architects and designers going, out and mapping the landmines and the political and?
Yep.
They are?
Yep.
Oh,
They're trying to change the whole building code.
The guys that are on the line, that if you went to a guy today, he's gonna give you what he knows today. So we gotta change this stuff from the top.
Okay.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, I have to leave in 10 minutes, so could I move up item 6 and then Howard, if you can take over from 5, that would be great, so.
And the good news is I have a time constraint too, so I'll spend a lot of time.
Okay. Or not good, well, whatever.
It's fine.
So, we've been meeting at this time, but I guess there's been some schedule changes. Frankly, this wasn't ideal for me too, as you could tell, so what, do we have some options, or are we gonna take?
Yeah, so really it's just a discussion amongst the group to see if you would want to change the meeting time. We have 3 more meetings for the year scheduled for September, October, and November. We canceled December's meeting. But if you all would like to change the time, then we'd like to open the floor to see if we can schedule a
And
different time.
then November, does that run into Thanksgiving at all?
The current schedule that we have for November. Let me check the meeting.
Yeah, it's the 2 days before Thanksgiving, I believe is
Oh, is it,
when we have the.
The one that we have scheduled
or is
was,
it the Thanksgiving Friday?
Should we just go through these dates?
Yeah, let's do 2 things while we also have a constraint with one board member's calendar, so we were preparing for this. It seems like potentially Tuesday afternoon,
correct, yeah, Tuesday afternoon, so the 4th
Yeah, so-
Tuesday.
so that doesn't work.
I have council meetings on
Council
Tuesday
meetings,
at
okay,
that's
so-
fine,
You're
or
already
fine.
know.
All right, so-
Are you first and thirds, or do you have?
Every week.
You have
We
council
meet
meeting
every single
week?
Tuesday,
Oh,
starting
my
at
Lord.
as early as 3 o'clock, so.
We may get a third council meeting this year in my city, and we only meet twice a month.
So the 22nd Thursday in November, oh no, it'd be the 29th. Oh, no, it'd be the
You wanna start
22nd.
with the
Yeah, so our current meeting for November is the 22nd, that's a Friday.
Can we do September, just?
So,
I know there's a national.
Is there like a
League of
date,
Cities
or are we just trying
it's
to
the
piecemeal
national,
them in?
it's.
How
be
the
at the-
chair lead the discussion?
Alright.
Which date do you want to start with?
Let's just start with September then. So
Okay.
September 27th would be the next meeting. But we have one member who can no longer
I won't
make
be able
this
to
time.
make it.
There's two now. So,
Okay.
okay.
Does anybody have a proposal on?
Yeah.
Change that.
I was gonna suggest Thursday afternoons
Perfect.
from like
So
1
let's,
to 3. I know we have Bachman
Can we
in the
just take,
morning,
yeah,
but.
can we take them one at a time?
this is the hardest thing to do as a group.
Mhm.
If we're moving just 3 meetings, maybe we can get away with it. Like you say, Thursday afternoon.
Yeah,
Those
we
of
can
us-
also
Yeah.
doodle this, yeah.
Yeah, connected
We
with
could
PTA, it's a
doodle it.
problem. I have a standing meeting at 2 at the city. It's a complicated, Thursday afternoons are bad for me, for example.
So I was
Late
gonna
afternoon.
suggest that we talk about the
Depends on
3
which-
meetings,
Depends
because
on which
next
week
year
we
the
land
makeup
on.
will be different.
Correct.
And then would you mind just doodling out some other options, and then we'll just pick dates that work for the majority of us. I think
It's
that's
4th
the
Thursdays.
easiest way to do this.
Great.
Well, it is typically, right?
So we'll
Yes.
plan on
It's the 4th Thursday.
the remaining meetings of this year. Maybe if you're ambitious, we'll go to January because I
Yeah.
think committee assignments only happen in the January, February timeframe. So, all right, we'll do it 3 to 4 months at a time.
I think, yeah, at least until the new
Yeah.
makeup is.
It's always better if we can find a spot, right? Because once you lock that, then the other stuff can't
Right,
approach.
it's just
We change
mid-schedule
everything.
changes happen
I get it.
right now, so that's why we are looking at it.
I mean, if 2 of us can't make it, I mean, the important is things are fun.
So we're gonna,
We'll
So
do,
we-
we're gonna do a doodle.
I have a comment about November. November 22nd is the National League of Cities Conference in San Antonio.
Yes, that's like from the 20th to the 22nd,
It is
23rd.
a,
Might even be earlier, some people go earlier, so that week
Right.
is out. And then we have Thanksgiving the following week, so I don't know, if November.
So actually, wonder
Do we
if, it-
meet, oh yeah, we do have.
if you do have blackout dates already,
Mhm.
maybe you send it to us, so we won't,
the big giant synchronizing ones, like the league, right?
Mhm.
A bunch of people.
There's
We
one
send them
in-
to you, you
Yeah.
collect them for 2 days, and then maybe early next week you call us
perfect, that would be
trying to
great.
the blackout.
Yeah.
Great.
I'm out of town, so the blackout.
Like the plan? All right.
Look, it's a plan.
The second part of this item is discuss the January board meeting date.
Oh, great.
So currently it's scheduled for January 8th. And we are proposing to move that the following week to January 15th.
This is a staff issue, because if we have it on the 8th, board reports need to be put in on the 3rd, which means
Oh, yeah, no.
we're working over the vacation time.
And the 15th is our council meeting, right? That's part of the problem.
Oh, really? You mean Wednesdays, third Wednesday?
First and third Wednesday of the month.
Okay.
The 4th Wednesday is
Is it okay to wait that late?
The 22nd? Yeah.
wait,
Oh, you do it? I'm gonna be gone because I think the mayor's conference is that week.
there are things like if an individual's gone, there's alternates on the city, but, you know, to say my city can't attend that's where I ran into the small groups, not good.
Yeah, that's my problem too.
Okay,
Do you wanna keep it?
Why don't I suggest something, we'll take this back and look at this again.
okay, yeah.
I think we could do an 8th meeting with it may be a limited agenda.
Oh, sure.
We'll figure out how we
If you
can.
do it on the 8th, you're gonna have to add on singing happy birthday to me, but. so-
Oh, okay.
Then you can't have
I was happy with moving off the 8th, but just didn't land someplace.
oh, there's
Yeah,
the women's equity meeting is,
The 15th.
no,
yeah,
We
that's
have
always, that's always that way.
yeah, it's always been that way. You guys have to leave early.
Mhm.
All right.
Okay,
Limited agenda isn't the end of the world.
all right.
That's true.
Any public comment on this item? not, we'll go back to item 5, about electric vehicle infrastructure joint action plan, and I've asked Howard to
And that's our last item, right?
facilitate, yes.
Perfect.
And I'm sorry, I missed it out, I'll catch up on it later.
Not a problem.
Have a good weekend, everyone. Thank you.
All I gotta say is we'll take a staff report now.
Yes, all right, thank you. There's a lot here, and I'm going to suggest that we take kind of a bridge approach.
Excellent.
And maybe we're gonna drive to some specific slides, and then we can come back if warranted to what tells the broader story. Since you all are quick learners, we can probably take you faster than the punch. But first, I'd like to again introduce Richard and Sam from E-Mobility Group. We've been privileged to work with two of them and a broader team that they've pulled together over the last several months as we put together we're calling an EV Infrastructure Joint Action Plan. It will be a written report. We're in the process of finalizing recipes on that right now. It's pretty comprehensive and long. And we're gonna kind of share the punchlines here with you today. Justin Zagunis has been the lead analyst on this. Justin's on Amy's team. Amy and Justin have made huge contributions to this, and we're going to be hearing from Justin. But you may not know him as well as he does some of the rest of us, but you will soon.
Good luck.
Yeah. So on the building electrification front, we've charged into some programs, heat pump water heater, showcase grants, reach codes. But on the transportation side, which is 50% of all emissions, we had programmed in this important strategy. We wanted to take a little time to figure out what targets to really take on. And it's a complicated space, lots of use cases, segments, sectors, et cetera. And so that's what we've attempted through this effort to defog. We've taken a snapshot of what's going on in our service territory with respect to EV adoption and with respect to deployment of electric vehicle infrastructure. We've developed 6 target program concepts, or 6 program concepts, which we will share with you. We have implementation plans taking shape for those. We've also, through this process, engaged a stakeholder group, and we have jumped into the funding arena and had, an immediate payoff with that, as you heard last week. So that, this is all coming together very nicely, and there will be some rationalization of that money from Cali VIP with the programs we've identified, but by and large, they fit together really nicely, and we can pretty much double our impact as a result. So with that, I'm gonna suggest we jump forward to slide 6, and we can come back to the other stuff if you're interested, but this is a good tee up for where we eventually go for programs. Plus, there's so much on here, you wouldn't want to miss this. All right, Justin.
I could spend the whole presentation on this
Yeah.
slide, so we'll move quickly and just kind of keep it to the highlights. I'll kind of talk you through. I know there's a lot on this slide. The key piece of this is use cases. This is kind of the different ways that charging occurs, and we wanted to make sure that we were thinking critically about each of these when we think about how to facilitate additional infrastructure deployment. And so the bottom 2 here on the left are both residential use cases, which means when people go home, they plug in. Next 2 are workplaces. This is employers offer their employees the ability to charge while at work. Fleet use case, and that typically looks like a privately owned or controlled charging yard or something like that, where the fleet vehicles go to charge. And I do want to note that fleet here means both large fleets like buses or shuttles or something like that, but also it could be smaller fleets like city municipal fleets or transportation network or taxi companies, exactly. And then we have 2 public use cases. Destination charging, which is when you go to like a shopping center or something like that and there's a charger. and then corridor charging, which is really to support longer distance travel. And so what we heard, we engaged a stakeholder workshop. Well, we had 2 stakeholder workshops where we engaged a variety of participants from our member agencies, from the EVSE industries, and from local organizations. And what we heard was that these were really the important ones for us to focus on due to low existing deployment and due to a variety of really challenging barriers to market adoption. And so that initial feedback we got. We also did some customer surveying on this topic. And so this first chart here shows the percent of our customers that we surveyed who reported that the need for charging was significant in each of these use cases. And so you can see, the top few here: single family, workplace, MUD. It's kind of these bottom 4 here, which is where a lot of the charging currently occurs. When we asked them then where they thought the need for us to support the deployment of additional charging was significant, really interesting change.
It's different.
Yeah, it's different. That's why I put them up, is to spot the difference. Yeah, you see workplace, single family shifted to the end. MUD, fleet really rose to the top, and that's consistent with what we heard from our stakeholders. And let me define MUD.
Thank you.
Multi-unit dwellings.
What is it, multi-unit building?
Multi-unit dwellings, yeah, so
Okay.
multi-family
And we
housing.
have to talk about the current code, we'll get there.
And so, yeah.
And can you verbalize your interpretation? So if something was ranked highly on significant need, but low on need for SVCE support, people are saying, I think someone needs to do it, but we don't think it's SVCE's.
No, that's a great
role.
question. So I think single family is really high on the need for charging, just because when you are a single family homeowner and you buy an EV, you know that you're gonna wanna be able to charge at your home. And so you think there's a really high need for charging there. I don't think you need a lot of support to do that.
You can buy it on Amazon now.
Right.
So that one's easy.
And so that's why that moves like it does, is that
So
they definitely wanna charge at home. Single family homeowners definitely wanna be able to charge at home, so.
Well, is it also because there are rebates and subsidies, so PG&E has a subsidy already for a charger in a single family?
My guess is that most of the respondents probably weren't aware of that even. This was a response, these were customers some who had EVs, some who didn't have EVs. And so I don't even think they necessarily knew about that, they just thought it'd be pretty easy to plug in at home.
Just to center me here, when you say single family existing deployment high, I would guess the penetration of EVs and chargers in homes in our county is actually not very high.
I think you misinterpreted, right?
Yeah, it's a different statistic.
I think that if you have a car, charging at home is high.
Right.
I see, this
It's
is
not-
not people who.
Yes, we'll have it.
It's need.
Who have EVs.
Yeah, charging, in short, we don't see charging at single-family homes as a big problem here.
You can order it on Amazon, buy now, and they'll come install it. I mean, it's easy to do if you're a consumer, professional, whatever. Go to the other end, the multi-family one, because we have a little apartment complex in Sacramento, and I've noodled this for 5 years now, and I'm not smart enough to figure out how to do it. So I'm just telling you from personal experience, and if I get somebody who doesn't call every week and say, do you have electric car charging? Because you cannot find it in multi-family unless you're in some billion-dollar building.
Yeah.
So this chart was very intuitive to me, because that's been my personal experiences on the, man, if we can figure out how to solve multifamily, there's a bunch of people who want that.
Right, and I'll
There's no help.
Right. The legislation for new construction is that you have to put it in, but you have to put in a high, if I understand it correctly, high-speed charger. And the point is, people aren't gonna move their cars in the middle of the night when they're charged.
I know
You
that-
need multiple stations.
I've looked at that, it's so totally stupid, but I did find a vendor that does a 16 amp single circuit multi-head, and they'll share it. But there's only one vendor that's trying to go into that market, and then you get into California and our codes have gone the wrong way.
Yep.
Sorry.
No?
You're running the meeting, Howard.
Sorry, oh, that's right. I'm not allowed to discuss. Very good points, Rod. Thank you, Nancy. Too late. leg wasn't there, one was empty.
Go for it.
Great.
We should move forward.
And so I think we were gonna jump ahead then to this slide. Really talk just very briefly, I mean, I wanna mention that we're already doing some things here at SVCE, or intending to do some things that will support EVI deployment. So our Reach Code effort, is building focused, but it also has a component on EVs and EV infrastructure, and so we're supporting this space through a variety of our other efforts, and so we wanted to make sure that through this EVI plan, we weren't trying to duplicate anything that we're already doing, we're trying to do additive programs. So now we'll get into the programs that we're recommending as part of this joint action plan. The first two are both what we're calling ecosystem focused. First is this SV Tech, which is the Silicon Valley Transportation Electrification Coalition. And really the intent of that is to bring together a group of committed stakeholders like who we accessed for our workshops in the development of this plan, who make up our staff from member agencies, the EV and EVSE industry, some large employers, and regional citizen groups or other kind of coordinating organizations, and really have them come together to have a discussion, share information, but really focus on tactical deployment of charging infrastructure. A key component of that, from what we heard, is making sure that all of the available funding, like Cali VIP for example, is being brought into our service territory. And that's something that, because there hasn't really been a function like this at our local level, we're not really leveraging all of the existing funds that are out there. So we want to have this group to really go after those. We would do that by working with the other members within the group, but also by hiring a grant writing firm to help us go after some of the key, really high leverage opportunities that are out there. And then one other piece that we really heard strongly from our stakeholders was they want us to play a role in interfacing with some of the local, regional, and state agencies to help them sort of have an easier time with some of these steps. And so one thing that was brought up a lot is the PG&E interconnection process. And so how can we engage with PG&E to try to streamline that as much as possible for our people in our service territory and really lead to more deployment of EVI.
So, I may invite our consultants to speak about this a little bit, but in terms of numbers, estimate that we might be able to round up another $20 or $30 million over the next 3 to 4 years if we do this right.
For our territory.
For our service territory.
Wow.
And, I mean, there are dollars available out there from a number of different sources, and Richard and Sam put together a really nice sub-report, in a sense, on this. And this is one of these things that looks like overhead, and a grant writer, really. If we focus on going out and availing ourselves to these opportunities, and if we do it in the right way, we think we can have more Cali VIPs. And it may mean matching in some cases, in other cases not. But it just hasn't been happening to date. I mean, there really hasn't been any function that's been serving this purpose. So all the things we're working on, there's a reason this is A. we think it's pretty foundational.
Who wrote the grant that just won us the big match?
Sorry?
Who wrote the grant that won us the big match?
So it was a combination of PCE and SVCE that were really in the lead on that.
Yeah, I mean, that was really just a letter of intent and having ongoing conversations with the state. Wasn't like a.
Oh, we haven't won anything yet.
Yeah, we did, but it just wasn't a formal big grant process.
It helps to
Right.
be early, and it helps to be.
The money was there and they wanted to
The,
find a way to get rid of it, so they
Yeah.
made it easy.
So there's an entity, Center for Sustainable Energy, based in San Diego, that is the administrator of that Cali VIP program, and we began engaging with them about a year ago in conversation. appeared to be a glimmer of opportunity. And so SVCE and Amy and Rafael Reyes and PCE came together and brought together this consortium. But the instruction we got was go big or go home. Put together a multi-county effort, make it a big, we're the part of the world that, or part of the United States at least, that's further along on this than anyone. Make that, the centerpiece of your pitch. And then I think we might have been second in line, and maybe it fell apart in some other geography, and there we were. We really thought it was more of a next year. Anyway, I don't know, Richard or Sam, any other thoughts on this one?
Well, I would just say, and it's something to be explored, but you emphasized the multi-county on Cali VIP, and I think it's an open question for the stakeholders and for SVCE how important that will be. And again, kind of circling up even beyond the service territory. I don't want to prefigure that, but just note that when the state sees Silicon Valley, they don't understand all the different entities and the different LSEs and so on. They think kind of the big South Bay region. So we'll probably want to play with that in the context of specific solicitations and opportunities. No matter how we slice it, I think we can do a lot and do better than the status quo. So I'm not too concerned about that. But sometimes more means more for everybody in terms of collaboration.
Any questions on this one? We should move along. Quick.
So, I think you all know that ChargePoint is in Campbell. And I haven't talked to them in about a year, and I said I would when we were ready to. They have like 40 charging stations in their parking lot, but they were trying to do their high-speed charging ones, and PG&E would not provide the power upgrade. So however we do this, we cannot ignore the need to have power delivered to wherever these are.
That's my entire downtown, by the way. That's how bad it is.
Same problem.
Yeah, I can't get power from PG&E and they won't do the work.
We have restaurants that can't open.
Right, exactly. Okay,
So I'm
there are
serious.
some challenges in that.
No, and that, we heard that from your member agency staff, we heard it from ESC stakeholders, so that's
You're
definitely a
modern
key
city.
component.
It's bad.
Okay,
Okay.
please.
The other ecosystem program is the regional recognition program, which really would be looking to find out who has done a really good job with this, promote their best practices, and share that with others, and then try to get organizations in our area, cities, other regional groups, that kind of thing, to commit to some form of an electrification pledge. Where they're just saying, here's a plan for how we're going to install more EV charging at our property or something along those lines. And then if they do that, they would be able to access some of the funding that we would be trying to secure through the SV Tech. And I think, say here, focus on large commercial, I think initially, from what we've seen to date, large commercial is where there's been a lot of success in deploying charging. And so we think we can get some best practices from them to start it off, some name recognition, and then hopefully that will inspire other smaller sort of
But it looked like our
organizations
target
to
area was
participate.
medium and small, because they don't have it.
Right, and so we need to get the best practices first, get people interested in sort of participating in this kind of regional recognition thing. But yeah, the goal would be that any kind of organization would participate ultimately.
So that's, lots of companies here do that already. I know a lot of them, like NVIDIA, don't have a lot of charging stations. They actually have a valet service that runs specifically to move cars in and out of the charging stations that they have. Silicon Valley Leadership Group has a big EV program. I don't know where it is now, but it was a big push, and they had a vice president in charge of doing it, so I don't know where that stands. But they're the ones that would get the commitments, the
And
bigger companies.
We had SVLG at our workshops as well, so they and charge points.
So if we have only 14 minutes left, what
Mhm.
else do we need to know?
Go to the next one.
That's exactly.
So 4 infrastructure focused programs. The first is what we call the Priority Zone DC Fast Charger Program. And so really you can think of this as, you imagine a map of SVCE territory. We'd be drawing a couple of circles, 10-ish circles that are our priority zones. and we would run a competitive solicitation process for organizations, EVSE, or employers, or other sort of property site hosts, to apply for our incentives if they are within those priority zones. And we would draw those zones to really focus on areas of a lot of multi-unit dwellings, because we think that if there's sort of a dense area of multi-unit dwellings, we can allow a lot of those residents to adopt EVs if they have access to centrally located fast charging. I think that's sort of the key part. The other thing is that we would work with the local member agencies to make sure that we were aligned with any transportation plans or anything like that. We want to make sure we're incentivizing this at the correct locations.
The thousands of residents going in at Valco, there might be
2.5 years, lawsuits cleared, yep.
How many minutes do we have? We don't have enough minutes for that.
Another program is the MUD technical assistance, and so this would be focused on deploying charging at MUDs. We would be looking at particularly garden style type apartment properties, because they're typically, the buildings are more spread out, so there's more space, more parking lot spaces, and so that would allow us to install charging at spaces that are not dedicated, they're shared.
Yeah.
Which, maybe people wouldn't be coming out right in the middle of the night to move and have someone else.
During the day.
But at least, that spot would be able to serve one day one person, another day someone else. And so, you do enable multiple EV adoption in that by just deploying one charger at one spot.
What does garden style mean?
Richard? Basically, 2-story maximum typically, with enough space in between to have a good ratio of parking spaces to apartments. Sort of more literally, and often literally with lawns and pools and that type of thing. Your typical sort of medium density apartment block, as opposed to one that might have less parking spaces than units, for example. That
Which
would
is
be
going
more
to happen
vertical.
in the future.
Which is more like the type that's gonna be in the future, well,
Where
like San
there's no-
Francisco or
where there's
something,
no
we have
parking provided.
5 stories and,
And
20% of the units have.
Or none.
Or not, or not,
Or
or
none.
not.
I mean, rather than, that term is, I'm just
Dense.
wondering why you would, no, I'm just wondering why you wouldn't say, for, technical assistance for any multifamily residential, with shared parking.
And that,
Because that immediately is gonna trigger for some people, hey,
yeah.
what about the rest, right?
No,
So I don't know.
that's a good point. I mean, our intent would be to allow anyone who could meet the criteria of a certain amount of shared, the goal would just be shared charging. That would be the goal. Our
If you have
outreach,
shared spaces,
If you go to a Realtor and say garden style apartment, they'll find it for you because they know what that is. But I get it, if this is focused on shared spaces and a multi-family, then let's just call it that.
and if it's more urban, so what? You
Yeah.
still have people with cars and
Right.
they still like to,
okay.
help
Good
you out
point,
here.
that's a good point.
No, we can change the name.
And the other piece is that, especially the top property owners in this area of these kinds of apartments represent an enormous number of units in
Yeah.
our service territory. And so by working with them on at least a few of their properties, we hope to get them comfortable and aware of charging as an amenity, and hopefully they can deploy it.
And by cost, you mean installation cost, the concrete, conduit, all that stuff that really is.
This is my exact space, and I promise you, there's no clear way forward in this.
Yeah.
So help here would be.
Okay.
Third program, workplace rebates, this would really be focused on small, medium business, which is what we heard. There would be some technical assistance component and also a rebate. It's a pretty straightforward program.
I assume when you say business, that could include municipalities and.
Buildings like this.
This
This is a
great
good
example. Building like
We're
this.
running this program for ourselves.
Yeah.
There is one city that provides free charging for their employees. Please, since we only have
Go
9
ahead
minutes,
and
please
announce
move
the
ahead.
topic.
Okay,
Let's talk
the
about
last program is fleet electrification planning. And so this would be another competitive solicitation process, and really we would be interested in any and every kind of fleet applying, large, light duty vehicles to heavy duty vehicles, various types of models. The goal is really to showcase how we can electrify these various types of fleets, and then those can be used as templates for other similar fleet owners down the road to electrify their own fleets.
Yeah. So before we do questions on the areas, can you go 2 slides ahead just so we see the 2019 priorities?
Yes.
And if you're gonna focus on those 3s now, do people have questions on the areas?
Not for 2019, I'm going to 2020.
Okay, you wanna go back 2 slides?
So my comment is, at some point, I need to understand how the change of time of use in October 2020 is going to impact these, how you are identifying and taking advantage of the daytime charging at the lower rates. And the second one is different cities negotiate different rates from different suppliers. So I think Campbell actually doesn't have their EV chargers from ChargePoint. I think they got a lower bid from someone else. And the city doesn't make any money on the public ones. And some of the rates are different. So I don't know how that figures into this, but the time of use change and the different vendors for public, I'm thinking some of these are going to be public. Well, actually, they didn't actually say that, did we?
When you looked at like the priority zones, I assumed
Those
those would
priority
be,
zone will
those,
be public.
those had to be public.
Okay.
And some of the small, medium business charging often is also usable by the
Mixed
public.
use type of.
Okay.
Depends on how it's
Parking
implemented.
Right.
Yeah.
And we should look at the criteria, whether it's employee only or employee only.
That's a good comment.
Or employee
Agreed.
8 to 5, or,
Apple has all the charging, it's all ChargePoint, but none of the
You have to
chargers
be
work
an
for
employee.
ChargePoint customers, or former employees apparently.
No?
We'll tell you how that happened.
I think key to these programs, I mean, we got a lot of stakeholder input, we designed these program concepts, and, down the road now, and as we work on launching these 3, we're gonna do the final sort of scope development and final requirement fine tuning to make sure that we know exactly, what is in and out of scope. But this is the direction that we got from our workshops.
So do your priorities, so I'm unclear about what overlaps with what, does MUD technical assistance fall under your early bucket list?
Switch to that slide again, because I think that's probably, that's an important slide.
So what of A, B, C, D?
We're doing ABC, we're planning to launch ABC in 2020, or 2019.
Meaning in the last 4 months of the year?
Cali VIP dollars start to flow, assuming everything works according to plan,
We have money, we gotta start
in
moving.
late spring of 2020. So we'd imagine these other areas, being filled in a sense by then. We're gonna have to be addressing the other areas too, because we're hoping that Cali VIP money is going to be supporting L2 deployment at workplaces and stuff.
Okay, what else do we need to know in our remaining 5 minutes, and what information do you need from us?
I think
Okay.
I wanna
We only did a third of the slides. But tell
I
us
want
what else
to
we
just
need to know.
mention very briefly, build on what Don was just saying. Cali VIP, obviously, a really important thing to make sure we are integrating here with these programs, and they align really well, I think. What we're thinking we'll do is essentially run these programs as we designed them. And instead of us processing the incentive payment, right, we just refer the applicant to Cali VIP to get their incentive payment processed, and in effect, we've doubled our available incentive dollars, so we can run the same programs and get.
Do we give, it's matching funds, right?
Yes.
So do we just, they have a management place and we just give them our funds?
Yeah, so, the board approved $8 million total, $6 million of that we're gonna put towards Cali VIP.
Right.
The state is also putting $6 million to we're all putting it into their contractor CSE.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they will administer incentives.
And this
So we're
12
in for
million
us.
is for what period of time?
So the state puts their $6 million in day one. So there'll be $6 million in for DC fast charging day one.
And so that exists until we exhaust it?
Until we
It could
exhaust
take
it.
half a year, or it could take 10 years.
Would it be 3 million for DC fast charge and 3 million for L2? Or?
So the way that it's gonna go in is 6 million at once for DC fast charge from the state. We're gonna put in our money into the L2 bucket over time. And that's just a logistics thing, because what they've seen is that DC fast charging goes really quickly. And so they wanna make sure they have all the money there up front.
When will that be available?
They're targeting May 2020. But to your question, we're planning to put our money in over 4 years. And so the 1.5 million a year into the bucket. But it's until exhausted, but if after 6 years there's still a bunch of money left, I think we would revisit the allocation of the funds, or if that made sense to keep it all in there.
So I'm still missing out who the end beneficiaries of SVTech are. Is it big companies? Is it small companies? Is it homeowners? Or is it apartment owners?
Do you want to take it, Craig?
Yeah, it's really all of the above, insofar as the state has different grant opportunities that are targeted to different areas. So sometimes it's only workplace, excuse me. Sometimes it's just fleets. Sometimes we're hoping there'll be a multi-unit development focused initiative coming soon. So it's kind of mix and match based on what the opportunities are out there. But frankly, it's the one category that tends not to get special state type grant support is single family. Everything else at some point or another is likely to get supported.
Okay.
There are school bus dollars.
Yeah, school bus dollars was a recent one, medium and heavy duty fleets was a recent one. They kind of come around in a cycle.
One other, it was in a pie chart in the buildup, but one of the things we learned out of this was that even though it doesn't represent a huge number of vehicles, fleet vehicles, medium and heavy duty, represented about a third of our transportation emissions.
Yeah.
And then they're at square one, electrification wise.
Yeah, sure.
There's electric buses emerging and that sort of thing. And charging in that context is a completely different game. I mean, it's heavy duty infrastructure where you really need to be working with PG&E. So we have a fleet program, but.
Oh, the Air District has a bunch of Goodwill trucks in San Francisco that are EV, right? But it takes a fair amount of subsidy right now to have a heavy vehicle.
Yeah.
And the Port of Oakland, another example. So my other question is, so the Air District's been in this game with charge for a long time with its programs. How does this complement, how are we making sure we're complementary and not providing, frankly, too much incentive for what people would already do, given all these dollars are public dollars? How are we coordinating or whatever?
You don't want double and triple dipping.
Well,
Too much, but it's about finding the most
it's
effective
about
space
yeah,
where everybody
exactly,
else is
right?
putting money in.
It's not about, it's just making sure that we're being responsible in the incentives that we offer, so we're incenting behavior that wouldn't otherwise occur.
Exactly, I hate to do incentives where there's already equal incentives from other sources, we should be doing spaces.
That's a great point, and I would just say that one of the things that we try to do here is emphasize the idea of RFPs, because just having a formula incentive where everybody gets $3,000 a charging point or something like that, frankly, Google doesn't need $3,000 a charging port.
Right.
And other examples could be given, but if we put an RFP out there to say multi-unit property owners, we can evaluate, well, what level of match are they bringing? How at need really are they? What would have happened if we didn't do the program? So I think it gives, the intention is to give SVCE a little more fine-grained control over how this match takes place. And also a loading order where like if Air District is already doing a bunch on fast charging, great, then we don't have to do so much.
So there is gonna be coordination here.
Absolutely,
What I'm
yeah, that's the essence of the regional.
And we are gonna focus less on big companies that have the means, and frankly, always have a lot of.
Yeah, that arrow chart in the front.
I really appreciated the comment about, thinking about if these things are going in, right, in parking spaces that are shared, a building like this, for example, the idea that they're not locked to they're available to the public, let's say, right? Because we imagine we're trying to fix the duck curve problem. And, yeah, we gotta be thinking about
And I think
either
we're-
charging late at night or
During the
how we get it done during the
Well,
night.
I'm thinking schools, teachers,
Yeah, no, sure.
We
And equity, right? To-
Yeah,
yes.
we glossed over this, again, it was in the tee-up, but 28,000 EVs in our service territory now. By 2025, 7X, plus or minus. I mean, projecting this out at a 33% growth rate, which is where we've been over the last few years. Now, will that exactly happen? Who knows? Could be 6X, could be 9X.
Yeah.
The point is it's a lot of X's, and so, yeah, and we absolutely have to get into MUD right now. 40% of our customers are MUD.
I have no access.
You know what and 9% EVs, 91% of EV
Yeah.
owners are single family. So, I mean, it's real lopsided, so we've got to work to address.
We have a lot of Chevy Bolts. being
Let
sold.
me take a comment from the public.
Thanks. So, 2 nights ago, John Supp and I were at Milpitas at a meeting. We parked our Bolts in the EV slots and John plugged his in. But he didn't realize that it was an old BachMed-funded charging system where his ChargePoint card didn't work, his EVgo card didn't work. So what I would propose is that we try rapidly to get to a world where either the actual Clipper card or a Clipper-like phone app works across all the different platforms. So you don't have to have a wallet full of different access cards. And I love the idea that chargers would be available 24 hours a day. Let's say, from 6 in the morning to 6 at night, the system said only for workers of Apple or Google, but after 6 o'clock at night, just like free parking on the street, anybody can go there. And those machines, the ChargePoint ones, can be adjusted so the rates change over time. Weekends can be, different price. So,
If you want some public funding, you need to open it up during non-work hours.
Exactly.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Any other comments from the public?
Brilliant.
No, thanks. We're gonna have to get on a glide path to done. Who else has got a question here?
I had one, but you made me forget it.
Can you just tell us what your next steps are and what the next touch point with us is? Because we're gonna have to close this up.
So we're bringing this to the board in September, so in another couple of weeks. We'll try to figure out how to do a similar, we might put a few more preamble slides in, but I'll try to get to the punchline on this quickly. It's an approval item, so we are looking for the board to say it. These make sense as 6 programs for us to go pursue. We're going to get to work right away after that on putting the SV Tech together, which really is going to be an outgrowth of the stakeholder group that we convened a few times as part of this process. We're going to go to work with the member agency working group on identifying locations for priority zone DC fast charging and getting that process going again, working off of this list here.
My recommendation before you get to the board, shuffle this up a little bit. I like some of the preamble stuff, it's gotta be pretty quick. And then just say, look, there's 6 areas, here's our priorities, and then tell us what the areas are. Telling us all the areas and then at the end trying to say, here are the priorities. Move the list up front. And I love all the details, but between you and me, there's so many bullets in each little area that you're gonna go 30 minutes for 30 minutes of questions and nobody will know what you even said. So somehow we gotta raise it up a little bit in the level. But I think if we knew where we were going, there are 6 areas, having looked at everything, you've seen the preamble, these 3 are the ones we wanna launch right now, we'll describe all 6 and we'll finish with 3. And just right up front, that list somehow ends up before we start going into the details. Any other comments for the?
I'm just curious if anybody heard of charcoal batteries or something like that. There's supposed to be a new battery technology coming out in about 2 years.
Called less.
Sure, it's not,
Is that a carbon, you mean a carbon
They-
charcoal, whatever,
they've, no, I
you know what I'm thinking?
way
You're
too much
asking.
about it. Yeah, they've changed the anode material, they're gonna get higher densities, and my son is in this exact space. Turned down a job offer with them, so we know a little bit about that.
Okay.
Is it gonna happen in 2 years? We'll see. But it's
I know
supposed to be the same process, the same formulation kind of stuff, so they're not changing a lot of battery chemistry, but they're changing the anode.
Okay.
It's supposed to give you higher density and cheaper cost, but
Yeah.
same manufacturing process, which is their selling point. They've got a lot of VC money lately, and they've actually gotten national news coverage on it.
Yeah,
What is it
there's a-
called? What's the organization of the technology?
It's a silicon carbon synthetic that they won't tell you the formulation of, but it was on CNN like a week ago.
Oh, was it, so
And-
is a futurist who came to the AIA,
Yeah,
and
this
told us-
company is in the East Bay,
Yeah.
and I can't remember the name, but if you email me, I could get it for you.
Thanks.
It's not that there aren't 6 other battery companies in the Bay Area. This one just happened to get a huge, like $100 million slug of money, so it's a big deal. Okay, anything else on this item? I apologize for rushing everybody, but I had to leave at 11:30, and we long ago
There's
lost
none of
the
us.
quorum.
Thank you, and
none
if
of
the
us
other
left.
comments on this, please send this to us, and then we have some follow-up meetings.
I think it's gonna get smaller, more focused, a little more high level for the board, and I think there's a lot of support. With that, is there anything else on the agenda that we need to discuss? Any other announcements that anybody needs to make?
I'll just say I appreciate the marketing effort in conjunction with this, you know, I think people really do need help navigating when, you know, when it comes to, as my daughter went through recently buying a car, you know, ought I really be doing this EV thing? It seems a little crazy, and I don't know enough about it, and as common as it is, she chose a Bolt, but, you know, with this or heat pumps or anything else, any tools we can put out to help make the, okay, for me, right, life cycle analysis, but
You walk onto
make
the
the
price.
analysis easier, on the economic trade-off.
We have to eventually get to the point of incentivizing salespeople. You walk onto the Chrysler lot, they won't sell you the plug-in hybrid Pacifica. You call any plumbing guy and ask for a heat pump, they'll tell you crazy.
And-
And every pool
and if-
contractor will not even talk to you about it.
If we have incentives, like, you know, you own an MUD and, you know, we got a deal going for you this month, right? Or the next 3 months, if you put this in, right, this is gonna be more attractive to you. We make that process of qualifying easy. We can play the same game as the car salesman did, right? What would it take to get your apartment building into a fast charger today?
Well, do it today if somebody
Level
just-
2 charger today.
Okay,
It is a customer experience.
I need to leave. I think we're gonna have to call the meeting adjourned.
Cheers.
And thank you guys.